Here's Carolyn Jarvis.
International education has become a lucrative industry as colleges and universities scour the globe in search of students and their tuition dollars. In our country alone, it brings in billions thanks to the prestige of a Canadian degree. Douglas College, based in New Westminster, BC, is one of those schools. It went to China, setting up campuses in the cities of Shanghai and Harbin. Chinese students saw the opportunity for a Canadian education as a passport to better jobs, graduate schools, and even entry into the Western world. But as Patrick Brown discovered, there are concerns the academic standards of those schools may not be the same as they are back home. And it's led some to accuse Douglas College of handing out dubious, if not outright fraudulent, degrees.
14 years ago, on this rain-swept campus in China, a little-known Canadian college found a new way to profit from China's education boom. In addition to recruiting students to attend Canadian campuses, why not bring the Canadian campus right here to China?
We have done our research hypothesis.
The school was Douglas College of New Westminster, BC. In partnership with Chinese schools, it would offer Canadian diplomas and degrees in business and finance, at 4 times the normal Chinese tuition.
Certainly internationalization is one of the pillars of our new strategic plan.
Douglas President Scott McAlpine.
What we're really talking about is a longer run phenomena of expanding the understanding, global citizenship. I happen to believe that that ultimately will contribute to world peace.
That was the plan. The reality, however, was much different, say these former insiders.
This was dishonest. It was outright fraud. I'm sorry to say it.
The ones that can't keep up and the ones that don't understand, it's a complete waste of 4 years of their time, our time.
To see what has happened with Douglas College is distressing.
A good idea gone badly wrong. That's the story told to 16 by 9 by a former dean and 2 former teachers in China. They say they warned Douglas College that Canadian credentials were being given to unqualified students on the campus in Harbin.
In China, if you do not pass a course, it's the teacher's fault.
After a career in banking and the Canadian civil service, Richard Thwaites taught finance at Douglas College in Harbin for 5 years.
In Chinese post-secondary education, there is a mentality, there's a culture, there's a belief that every student passes. And I have had Chinese faculty members tell me that they have been ordered to pass the students.
Eventually, everybody will pass by fair means or foul.
Former English teacher Chris Harpham says that approach surprised him too.
What do you think about that in terms of academic integrity?
Well, it's not a good thing, and many students and some of the English teachers were saying that this is just an easy way to make money.
Altogether, on its campuses in Shanghai and Harbin, Douglas has awarded about 1,500 diplomas and degrees. That's Douglas President Scott McAlpine on stage in Harbin, posing with each graduate last June. British Columbia's Minister of Higher Education, Naomi Yamamoto, also attended last year's graduation ceremony.
And serves as a model for international degree programs.
Yes, that's what she said. The Douglas program is a model for international degree programs. International education is a huge and thriving business. Every year, 10 million Chinese students take the high school graduation exam and start looking for a college. This is where they come to look for a coveted overseas education. Canada's a hot ticket here.
I heard University of Toronto has the greatest engineering program in the world.
More than 80 Canadian colleges, universities and school boards sent recruiting teams to this exhibition last year. International education is worth about $7 billion a year to the Canadian economy. For Chinese students who don't have the money to study overseas, a foreign education inside China is an affordable option. That's a tempting market, but a major reason why many foreign universities have shied away from partnerships like the ones Douglas has in Shanghai and Harbin is that the Chinese partner schools often try to insist that all students must pass. Robert Buller was Douglas Dean of Commerce and Business Administration until he left last year. He now lives in Vancouver.
But what was happening in China was that there was never any attrition. Everybody always passed. And this bothered our faculty a great deal. They were under huge pressure to get everybody through.
This one student, he was actually one of my favorite students, and he failed every one of my courses miserably. And I would give him back his midterm or whatever, and with a big 0 on it, and he'd say, "Thank you, Richard." And of course, in the 4th year, there he was again in my most advanced class, and once again he failed. But I've since learned that, yeah, he graduated.
They're driving around, going from place to place, and just taking pictures, and then they'll stop and they'll walk around.
Next on 16 by 9, is this school cheating on exams?
We then discovered that there were black market exam answer sheets being circulated widely around the college.
Former teachers give Canadian college a failing grade.
A class of Chinese students taking a Canadian course in finance in the city of Harbin, China. Almost all of them will get high-value Canadian diplomas and degrees from Douglas College in British Columbia, which offers a joint program here. But former teachers tell 16 by 9 that many of these credentials go to unqualified students. They say that bit by bit, Douglas College has handed control of the program to its Chinese partners. And those Chinese partners are manipulating the grades. Former teacher Richard Thwaites.
It is an attempt to bring Canadian education system into China. But in fact, what has happened is the exact opposite. The Chinese method has come into Canada, and it's essentially a Chinese course. So the official record, student record, demonstrates that this student took this course in Canada, when in fact that's not true.
Thwaites showed 16 by 9 a spreadsheet of marks he gave to 4th-year students for a finance test. He failed 83 of the 115 students. He says a Chinese teaching assistant reversed all but one of the failed grades. Harpham had a similar story. He says he had a 4th-year student who couldn't even understand the words "good morning," but somehow managed to pass the Chinese government's English test and his Douglas exams.
There were many cases like that, yeah.
Did Mark, who couldn't understand good morning, did he pass that exam?
Yes, he did.
How?
By means unknown.
By means unknown.
Unknown to some, maybe, but former teachers told us of at least one way students went from a fail to a pass. They were given progressively easier make-up exams by the Chinese instructors until they passed.
Well, supplemental exams are not allowed under the Douglas College system, and it was very uncomfortable that our partners were doing this. We then discovered that there was very little control on those supplemental exams, and that there were black market exam answer sheets being circulated widely around the college in an effort to get students to cram enough through to get a bare pass.
The former Douglas insiders say the college knew about the problems and did nothing for years, all the while winning awards and applause from the BC government. Here's Premier Christy Clark promoting international education on a trade mission to China last November.
I'm really proud of the infrastructure that Douglas College and other institutions in British Columbia have built over the years. For us, it's really important to maintain our reputation for quality.
A few weeks after Clark praised the college's work, an official evaluation by Douglas College's partner school in Harbin gave a very different assessment. A team led by retired Professor Tung Mao Tang reported that many students can't understand enough English to pass their courses. If they don't understand the foreign teachers teaching in a foreign language, he says, they're like ducks listening to thunder. If we fail them, it's a loss for the school. But if we pass them, we're compromising our standards. It's unacceptable for the students and for the university. You're already aware of this problem.
Tours. If I take a tour, everybody say tour. Tour.
When Douglas College first came to China 14 years ago, all of its classes were taught by Canadians like Jeff Ward. Now there are just 2 Canadian teachers in Harbin and 2 others on the Shanghai campus.
The reality is we're in China. If we had all the money in the world, it would be ideal to have Canadian teachers teaching each course.
Today, 80% of the courses for the Douglas Diploma and Degree are taught by Chinese faculty, and they determine most of the student grades. These diplomas and degrees marked given at New Westminster give students who studied in China the exact same credentials as Canadian students graduating in Canada. And that's just not fair, says Thwaites.
Because in Canada, I know that there are Canadian students working towards the Douglas College bachelor's degree that are having a very difficult time. It's a difficult program. The students that are applying for graduate schools are actually competing with the Chinese students that are coming out of China with the same degree, and they won't get into the graduate program. So it's unfair to Canadian students.
Thwaites wanted something done, so he took his concerns to his department head in Canada at the time, Robert Buller. But when Buller tried to do something about it, he says the Douglas administration just didn't want to listen.
So the business side of Douglas, by which I mean the profit-making side of Douglas, was in control of decisions and was able to overrule things that you wanted to see done.
Exactly. And in fact, they didn't support most of the things that the teaching faculty wanted to do. Then the initiatives died. We got nowhere.
Next on 16 by 9, who's in charge of handing out dubious degrees?
It says you're giving out degrees without credentials. Who authorized that?
That's the question.
I was the only one at Douglas College that raised the term academic fraud.
Business Dean Robert Buller was outraged. He'd been told the grades of students in China were being manipulated.
Academic fraud.
Yes, sir. And I have to tell you, it upsets me now to even use that term, and it's an incredibly strong term, but that was my conclusion, that this was not just sloppy record keeping. This was not just giving Johnny a break. This was dishonest. And I went forward to my bosses and reported it so.
Buller says he has documented proof, registrar's records of doctored grades.
And you took that document to whom?
I went first to my direct superior, who was the VP academic, and she brushed me aside. That's the end of it. This was not something that could be swept under the carpet. So subsequently, I went directly to the president.
Scott McAlpine.
To Mr. McAlpine, yes.
You take to him evidence of what you say is academic fraud, and what happened?
It was Probably the most distressing meeting I've ever had in my academic career. The president looked only at the first sheet and then terminated the meeting. Walked away and said to me that he needed plausible deniability, and he wanted to see and hear nothing more.
We're quite pleased with what we're doing in China, and we're quite pleased with our whole Douglas International.
We took Buller's account to the president of Douglas College, Scott McAlpine.
Did he come into your office with student records showing fraudulent grade changes?
I have not seen that document to my recollection.
The way Mr. Buller describes this is academic fraud on a large scale. Do you have an answer to that?
If there is academic fraud on any scale, we need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to investigate it. I do not have that information and that data at this time.
You still have this document that you took to him. Could you show it to us?
I can.
Here's the document McAlpine doesn't remember seeing. Buller says it shows student marks recorded by the registrar in China, but then questioned by the graduation officer in the registrar's office in Canada.
So the registrar in Douglas College, New Westminster in Vancouver, is taking the document and she's going, oh, wait a minute, this isn't the same. These grades aren't the same as what you told me back in May.
That's correct. So here's a student where some of them are all right, but then she's got anomalies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And these P's are pass. And she's saying this pass shouldn't have happened because all these numbers have been illegitimately changed.
It starts as just a question. And what we're left with here are the student records that did not jibe, that a mark was recorded here for which there was no evidence that an exam had in fact been passed.
These are the most questionable evidence of fraud.
That's
outright, blatant.
Outright, and unfortunately, it's not 1 or 2 students, because you get to the next page and look at how many there are. What really upset the registrar was that there were a raft of grades that were simply raised. No supplemental exam, and suddenly a low failure is now a high pass.
It's extraordinary that he says that this happened in your office, and this document with all of these grade changes marked in orange by your graduation officer, and you don't remember this happening?
No, I do not.
He's completely fabricating it then?
I do not remember it happening.
But from your perspective, is it worth the damage done to your own institution by making all these accommodations with the Chinese ones?
Well, the damage done to our institution, I'm not certain that that there has been immense damage done yet.
We then asked McAlpine about a second Douglas College document, a 2010 internal report on the Douglas China program.
It says here, there is no doubt that some students are about to receive a Douglas College credential, that is in June 2010, who have not earned this credential. This cannot be allowed to occur without damaging the academic integrity of the program and diminishing the credential itself. Within days, 100% of the Harbin class got a degree or a diploma. You agree?
We agree that this cannot be allowed to occur.
It did occur.
Without damaging the credential.
It did occur, and it damaged the credential, and it damaged the institution.
I agree.
Yeah, it says you're giving out degrees without credentials. He warned you that it would damage you, and you went ahead and awarded the degrees. Who authorized that?
That's the question.
And the answer?
I don't have it yet.
Having read this, you went ahead and gave out those degrees and diplomas. Wow. Okay.
Patrick, my point is rectifying the past is not within our purview. Can we make progress toward the future? The answer is yes. Are we? The answer is yes.
Okay.
McAlpine said that after that 2010 report, orders were issued to tighten entrance requirements in Harbin and to improve the teaching of English. He also said Douglas put in place a new policy on those make-up exams. Last year, however, with McAlpine in attendance, The 2011 graduation class in Harbin was another astounding success. More than 97% of the students passed. McAlpine says that's just the way things work in China.
The probability is that if once you are admitted to an institution, you will succeed with a degree or whatever the credential is.
So, at Douglas College in China, where many students don't speak enough English to understand their teachers, almost 100% of students pass. Meanwhile, at Douglas College in Canada, where English proficiency is a must, only about 2/3 of students finish their 4 years with a credential. Remember BC Higher Education Minister Naomi Yamamoto? This is her handing out the degrees in Harbin in the summer of 2011. She's also the person in charge of protecting the integrity of BC's international education. We had some questions for Minister Yamamoto about the integrity of the Douglas program in China.
We've been lucky with the weather.
You know what? I brought you to the nicest place in British Columbia.
She granted 16 by 9 a few moments of her time in an early morning meeting on the North Vancouver waterfront. Yamamoto said she didn't know about any problems with the Douglas China program.
Well, first of all, Patrick, I think those allegations still have to be proven, and I wouldn't really want to jump to any conclusions.
This is a multi-billion-dollar business, international education. If this is important to the economy of British Columbia, aren't you obliged to do a better job of protecting the brand?
We've taken the leadership role in terms of actually identifying quality in education at the post-secondary level. We have a very rigorous system in place to ensure that we maintain consistent quality.
I appreciate that we did get a comment.
Despite this vigorous system to protect quality, 2 weeks after our interviews with McAlpine and Yamamoto, Douglas College announced that it was ordering an independent review of its practices in China. But any changes may come too late to repair a damaged reputation of a school, its teachers, and Douglas College graduates in China and at home in Canada.
They're going to be looked at in a lesser light, and that's not fair. And the faculty, their work is suspect because other graduate schools are now looking at them saying, we're very unsure of these Douglas qualifications now.
Next on 16 by 9, dying to lose weight.
She died at a young age due to complications with obesity that she fought for years to overcome.
Why did this woman write her own obituary?
Chinese schools, it would offer Canadian diplomas and degrees in business and finance, at 4 times the normal Chinese tuition.
Certainly internationalization is one of the pillars of our new strategic plan.
Douglas President Scott McAlpine.
What we're really talking about is a longer run phenomena of expanding the understanding, global citizenship. I happen to believe that ultimately will contribute to world peace.
That was the plan. The reality, however, was much different, say these former insiders.
This was dishonest. It was outright fraud. I'm sorry to say it.
The ones that can't keep up and the ones that don't understand, it's a complete waste of 4 years of their time, our time.
To see what has happened with Douglas College is distressing.
A good idea gone badly wrong. That's the story told to 16 by 9 by a former dean and 2 former teachers in China. They say they warned Douglas College that Canadian credentials were being given to unqualified students on the campus in Harbin.
In China, if you do not pass a course, it's the teacher's fault.
After a career in banking and the Canadian Civil Service, Richard Thwaites taught finance at Douglas College in Harbin for 5 years.
In Chinese post-secondary education, there is a mentality, there's a culture, there's a belief that every student passes. And I have had Chinese faculty members tell me that they have been ordered to pass the students.
Eventually, everybody will pass by fair means or foul.
Former English teacher Chris Harpham says that approach surprised him too.
What do you think about that in terms of academic integrity?
Well, it's not a good thing, and many students and some of the English teachers were saying that this is just an easy way to make money.
Altogether, on its campuses in Shanghai and Harbin, Douglas has awarded about 1,500 diplomas and degrees. That's Douglas President Scott.
Not be the same as they are back home. And it's led some to accuse Douglas College of handing out dubious, if not outright fraudulent, degrees. "14 years ago on this rain-swept campus in China, a little-known Canadian college found a new way to profit from China's education boom. In addition to recruiting students to attend Canadian campuses, why not bring the Canadian campus right here to China?
We have done a research hypothesis.
The school was Douglas College of New Westminster, BC, in partnership with
Here's Carolyn Jarvis.
International education has become a lucrative industry as colleges and universities scour the globe in search of students and their tuition dollars. In our country alone, it brings in billions thanks to the prestige of a Canadian degree. Douglas College, based in New Westminster, BC, is one of those schools. It went to China, setting up campuses in the cities of Shanghai and Harbin. Chinese students saw the opportunity for a Canadian education as a passport to better jobs, graduate schools, and even entry into the Western world. But as Patrick Brown discovered, there are concerns the academic standards of those schools